Hello everyone, how are you? I'm the devil, Ari Thurger, and today I'm going to talk about the devil, Satan, Lucifer, the scapegoat whenever Christians feel the need to be absolute psychopaths and concoct all sorts of macabre tortures and ways of punishment because of their own insecurities and absolutely consumed by their bitter hatred because a woman once told them no. And as the entitled brats they are, and in the belief everybody else owes them something, their feelings got hurt. So they started destroying the world in the name of religion to cover up their own personal failures. So they blame it all on the devil. They were possessed by the devil, or the devil made me do it, or the devil led me into temptation and deceived me, when it's in fact their God that works in mysterious ways. But of course, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here today to talk about the figure of the devil. Surely a very quick and general panorama on the evolution of this figure throughout history until it became associated with witches and witchcraft. This is a sort of continuation of the previous video on the figure of Diana, the Roman goddess, as precisely being the chosen pagan goddess or figure, as the figure of the Middle Ages used by the church to explain the wrongdoings of the pagans and help bishops to identify witchcraft and all the works and illusions of the devil, and thus Diana became the major figure associated with witchcraft and witches and the night flight phenomenon in the Middle Ages, of course, which eventually led to, later on, contemporary neo-pagan assumptions of a unique great goddess of witches. But all of that, in the mentality of the medieval and early modern period clergy, were nothing more than illusions created by the devil to lead people astray from the right path. So, how on earth did we come to this? How and why the devil became such a major figure and the portrayal of evil incarnate? So let's explore the evolution of the devil throughout history, obviously. And by the way, I hope you have enjoyed the introduction. Mr. Thorstein is always full of surprises. Now, with no more delay, please, let's get started. Because this is an October video, I always like to get in the mood of the season. So when we study the history of witchcraft, there's always one figure that pops out everywhere, and we can't possibly escape it. The devil. A relentless fight between the church and Satan. But the church never actually got the chance to catch Satan, so their frustrated attempts led them to take revenge on the innocent, and the church became the very thing they professed to fight against. Here I go again. But the devil became a figure deeply rooted in our imagination, often depicted as having horns, a tail, hooves like a goat, ruling in the fiery pits of hell and commanding 1,000 legions of demons. And for some reason, he only understands Latin, and despite all his awesome and outstanding powers, he only delights in leading sinners astray from the right path with the mischief he hatches. But the devil is, in truth, a gradual merging of a number of different cultural influences, eventually creating a more concrete idea during the Middle Ages and in the course of the early modern period. The devil in our societies became a lot more prominent when the church made all the efforts to eradicate lingering pagan beliefs throughout Europe. The devil we know of today emerged during the Middle Ages, and it was nothing more than a synthesis of various biblical and mythical figures. The rebel leader of the fallen angels who attempted Christ in the New Testament, the serpent who tricked Eve in the Garden of Eden, and the figure who would be known as Lucifer, as being associated with the morning star, and so on and so forth. And there's definitely a great influence from the ancient Iranian Persian religion, Zoroastrianism, and the duality of good and evil, the fight between Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Wisdom, the Creator and highest deity, against Angra Mainyo, or Harimon, god of darkness, destruction, death, evil, and disorder for the followers of Zoroastrianism, of course. Now, Zoroastrianism, without a doubt, influenced the peoples of the Middle East, eventually, we shall get to that, and brought this very persistent dualism idea. But the physical appearance of the devil owes its origins to the old pagan gods of Europe. Now, one of the very first written sources where Satan is mentioned is precisely in the Old Testament, in which the Hebrew word Satan means adversary, accuser, or obstructor. I'm not going to try to pronounce Satan in ancient Hebrew because I don't know, and because we might get this literal translation, but the letters themselves mean a lot more as to the meaning of the figure of Satan in ancient Hebrew. But in the Old Testament, this Satan seems to refer to both angels and humans, and simply to denote a person or entity that opposes or obstructs. It's an entity that stands in the way. It prevents from moving forward. It prevents the course of life. That's the original meaning. But then it's in the book of Job, which would later be included in the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, that we find the first application of the word Satan in a specific figure, an angel of God. Not specifically the name of the angel, but a title. It's in the book of Job that Satan takes a more distinct and individual personality, as an angel in God's divine court. Satan's actions are with the full permission of God. He is next to God in heaven before the throne of God. In this account, God asks this angel, whose title is Ha-Satan, literally the Satan, he asks him about a mortal man named Job, whom God thinks to be absolutely perfect because of his faith towards God himself. But Satan points out that the mortal man is only faithful to God because he has the favor of God, because God showers him with riches and good fortune. So basically, the idea is that Job's faith towards God is shallow, and it is only due to the beneficial things God gives to the mortal man. So Satan asks God to leave his court and test the faith of the mortal man named Job. Satan attempts to provoke Job into cursing God by subjecting him to great adversity, precisely. So it's curious that the first depiction of Satan is not as the figure that causes evil or evil incarnate, but the figure that exposes evil in the hearts of mortals by challenging their faith and loyalty to God. Satan starts off as one of the most trusted angels of God. Actually, they talk to one another with great familiarity. And God even entrusts Satan to act on his behalf to uncover the unfaithful and the sinful on earth. And this account is actually one of the several different sources that help to later on compose the story of Christ, because later on in the New Testament, Satan appears again, playing the exact same role, but this time testing the faith of Christ himself by tempting Christ in the wilderness, in the desert. And this idea of wilderness is actually very important because, if you have watched my previous video on Diana, you understand the amount of religious connotations the wilderness has in the pagan mind of the past, especially in the Roman mind, which would have a great deal of influence, if not indeed the main influence on the construction of early Christianity itself. The wilderness is the place outside the civilized world. It is chaos, the untamed, the place away from the temples and the sacred ground within the walls of the city. It is the realm of the pagans. But anyway, this account in the New Testament does resemble a lot the account in the book of Job. But this time it isn't specifically said that God sent Satan to test Christ, but the role of Satan remains exactly the same. Not the cause of evil or the principle of evil, but the figure that tests the faith of mortals. So this is the first depiction of Satan, not an evil entity, but an angel, the trusted advisor of God himself, sent out on his behalf to test the faith and expose the evil in the hearts of mortals. So since Satan starts off as an angel, we do have that picture of him becoming a fallen angel, as it is often said that the devil was once the highest of all the angels in heaven, but he rebelled against God and was cast out from heaven and fell to earth. There are actually many versions speaking about this fallen angel. His own pride was to blame for his fall, as well as his refusal to bow down to God's mortal creation, Adam. And there's a source, for instance, and this actually appears in the Quran as well. And the fallen angel is called Iblis. It appears quite frequently, actually, commonly related to the creation of Adam and the order from God to bow down to him, to Adam. And when Iblis fell, he declared himself the enemy of mankind and gained a new role, a full dedication to leading mankind astray from the right path, starting precisely with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden by tricking into eating the forbidden fruit. But I think one of the most intriguing ideas around the figure of Satan was precisely when he was connected with the morning star, the planet Venus, to be more precise, which is the third brightest object in the sky, the first and second being the sun and the moon, respectively, of course, obviously. So the planet Venus has a long mystic association with the leader of the fallen angels. But when did this idea come to pass? Well, in the 5th century, in Saint Jerome's translation of the Bible, we come about, for the very first time, the name of Lucifer in a passage in Isaiah chapter 14 in the Hebrew Bible and in the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, which seems to be in fact in reference to the oppressive Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. As you know it, the longest reigning and most powerful monarch of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right? Now, in the original Hebrew, so before the Old Testament in the Christian Bible, this reference to Lucifer, son of the morning, is actually given as Hellel, son of Shahar. Hellel was none other than a Babylonian god of the morning star, whose father, Shahar, was the god of dawn. Saint Jerome in the 5th century translates Hellel, the god of the morning star, as Lucifer, by using the Roman name for the morning star itself, Lux Fero, bringer of light. He who brings the light, or bears the light, the herald of dawn, the planet Venus in the night sky, which can be seen just before dawn, announcing the coming of dawn. And I find this very curious because as an archaeologist myself, I have worked and still work, but that's about to change on a lot of contexts. But one of my fields of expertise as an archaeologist is precisely Roman Empire and the medieval period of religious transition as Christianity progressively takes shape and spreads and changes everything. And the 5th century marks precisely an enormous change in the religious mentality of Europeans, especially those of the former Roman provinces. Which is precisely when Saint Jerome translates this account and gives the name of Lucifer to Hellel, the ancient Babylonian god. As it so happens, there was a very important Iron Age god of the peoples that lived in what would later become Portugal. a pre-Roman god whose name comes to us actually in Latin, endovelicus. The final part of the name cus is an usual word termination in Latin. So focusing on just endovel, it's pretty hard to understand where this comes from, but it could be from the Celtic hand or hand, found in Hendre or Endru or Endur, which were the wise men of the Lusitanians, sort of druids, and vel or bel could mean lord, making it originally something between the lines of endovel or endovel, which would mean wise lord, the wise lord or lord of wisdom, or it could come from endovels, which means most black, the black one, the dark one, a totality of darkness. And both meanings actually fit perfectly into the ancient cult of this deity, Endovelicus, which not only was indeed a god of wisdom and medicine and light, the bringer of light, illumination, the god of dawn and also illumination in reference to knowledge, but he was also an infernal god, god of the underworld, the earth beneath our feet. Hence the reference to being the black one, a god of the underworld, bringer of light, the black light and wisdom of the underworld. And those who worshipped him at his temple or sanctuary would fall asleep and meet with the god, Endovelicus, in the depths of the ground, in the blackness of the underworld, where his light would shine through and illuminate people with wisdom. We see here a sort of shamanic journey into the underworld. What is also curious is that the cult of this deity, Endovelicus, in what is nowadays Portugal, survived until the 5th century precisely, when Saint Jerome comes up with Lucifer. And precisely where this deity was worshipped, at his sanctuary to this day, the surviving sanctuary, there is a river which to this day bears the name of Lucifecit, most likely from the Latin lux ferro, connecting this underworld deity of wisdom and bringer of light and god of dawn to the morning star, to lux ferro, light bringer. So we have an interesting parallel here from Portugal, Iron Age Portugal, ancient Portugal, and an underworld deity, the Dark One, the bringer of light, wisdom, knowledge, illumination, god of the dawn. Just as Lucifer is the morning star, the bringer of light, the herald of dawn, the star that shines in the dark night sky just before dawn comes, the herald of dawn. And Endovelicus, being one of the most important gods of the ancient lands that would become Portugal eventually, was also an underworld god. So perhaps we have here the first idea of Lucifer being an infernal deity, starting as a Chthonian or Chthonian deity, an underworld deity. So perhaps this idea of Satan as Lucifer, governing hell in the dark abyss of the earth, comes precisely from the early Roman Christianization of the powerful god of ancient Lusitania, which had been a very important Roman province of the Western Iberian Peninsula, Lusitania, right? So we also see here some parallels in the Iron Age Lusitanian god that might indeed have given some inspiration for Satan as Lucifer, the bringer of light, and being later an infernal figure ruling in the underworld. Anyway, it has been suggested, as said before, that in comparing Nebuchadnezzar with the morning star as well, the Old Testament prophet was probably, most likely, drawing on an older, probably Babylonian myth concerning the morning star itself and its fall from heaven. Post-exile, Jewish legend sees Samyasa, an angel who was in charge of keeping knowledge, suspended between heaven and the earth, just like the morning star, precisely, and suspended in between after being cast out of heaven, this angel. An idea present actually in the second book of Enoch, where precisely this angel, Samyasa, is called Sathaniel, who is thrown out from heavens with his angels flying through the air, all the way into the abyss. Again, the idea of the fallen angel, the fallen star. Of course, we must take into consideration, obviously, that Lucifer, the name, isn't indeed the actual name of the ancient Hebrew Satan figure. And indeed, the name Lucifer should not be identified with Satan. But the point here is that the early Christian church, from the 5th century onwards, believed that Lucifer was the name that represented the devil. In this case, represented Satan in his fallen state. So what I'm saying here is that the name Lucifer comes in the 5th century as a description of the falling of the morning star. It's the name chosen by the early church to describe, or better still, to represent Satan during his fall. There may be a Gnostic influence here, actually, because Satan is depicted as being the bringer of light, knowledge, wisdom. And as you know, Gnosticism is a collection of religious ideas and systems of belief which originated in the 1st century of the Common Era, precisely among early Christian and Jewish sects. But it understands God as the creator of the physical cosmos, not at all a whole benevolent figure, but the entity that somewhat enslaves souls within the material existence, preventing the spirit from reaching the true wisdom and the real divine beyond the physical cosmos, in Gnosticism. And it's curious that there is normally a figure that comes to present the true gnosis, the true knowledge, a fallen figure, a figure that detaches itself from the demiurge, from the entity that controls the physical cosmos. And this figure brings knowledge to set the spirits free. This also bears some parallels with the Yazidi faith. I've probably wrote on a previous note, I hope, in which the same angel called Satan in the Hebrew faith is called Malek Thahus, which literally means God's angel, in the Yazidi faith, which, according to this tradition, Malek Thahus is the central deity who governs the earth, and it is the true Lord of this world. So it's curious, this fallen star, fallen angel, something that falls from elsewhere to govern and bring wisdom in the physical world, but also to enslave souls. So we see here indeed a lot of belief systems starting to merge together, a lot of schools of thought being composed and creating a single figure. But how did this figure become the personification of evil? Because so far he doesn't seem to be that bad. Surely a cheeky fellow, but perhaps no more than that. Surely not yet the great lord of hell and the commander of 1,000 infernal diabolical legions. Not yet. Well, the figure of God for the monotheistic early Jews, or the Jewish people, was the only true God and the sole author of creation, be that good or evil. So there wasn't an actual concept, or rather there wasn't an actual principle to separate good from evil, as God in itself was the creator of good and evil. However, the exile of the Jews, the Jewish people in Babylon, would prove to have a great effect and a complete change in the Jewish perceptions of the very nature of evil. And why is that? Because the exiled Jewish people in Babylon were governed by Persians and their very dualistic religion, Zoroastrianism. There's the god of light, Ahura Mazda, the spirit of truth, in an eternal battle with his nemesis, Hanuman, the spirit of darkness and falsehood. Two opposites, as you can see. Dualism at its basic understanding. It is a battle between good and evil forever, until the end of time, when, of course, Ahura Mazda would ultimately triumph and Hanuman would finally be destroyed or defeated. So this already sounds familiar, doesn't it? Right. the eternal battle between God and Satan, and the Christian apocalypse in which good triumphs over evil at last. So indeed, in the later post-exile Jewish religious perceptions and perceptions of the principles of good and the principles of evil, Satan began to take on a very different turn and a very distinct identity and a unique personality. The Jewish Satan was influenced by the figure of Hanuman and became a sort of container of all evil and a seditious figure, tempting mankind to turn away from God's goodness. But it's particularly interesting because this perception of evil is more like a rebellious agent against the system, the very figure that expressed a defiant action towards the authority of a state or a monarch, or any sort of rulership. But anyway, the Persian dualism in the perceptions of the principles of good and the principles of evil was a key religious and philosophical element in later Christianity since its very start. Because for the early Christians, and to this day actually, God was unequivocally good. It encompasses all that is good, but this led Christianity into facing a very problematic idea. If God is all good, all powerful, all benevolent, and omnipotent, how could he allow suffering and evil to exist in the world? So the answer came from the Jewish Babylonian separate principle of evil, which in itself was influenced by Zoroastrianism. So enters this principle of evil personified in the figure of the devil. In the New Testament, as was said before, Satan was understood to be not only the adversary of mankind, but also of Christ, the one true Lord of the early Roman Christian faith. And so in here, the foundations of the everlasting cosmic battle between the kingdom of Christ and the kingdom of Satan were created or start to take shape. And Satan, like Hanuman in the Zoroastrian faith, would finally be defeated at the second coming. Well then, I'm afraid until now it was a sort of introduction and obviously a general idea on the historical evolution of the figure of the devil until we reach the Middle Ages at last. So let's see the devil in the Middle Ages and how he progressively became the companion of witches. As said before, the dualism expressed in the Persian Zoroastrianism had a huge impact on the religious minds of the Jewish exiles of Babylon. And of course, that would also influence, eventually, Christianity. The dualistic perception of the world and the divine was a key element in the development of the early Jewish and Christian Gnosticism, which would be especially notable among the medieval heretics such as the Bogomils and the Cathars. As you know, the Bogomils were devotees of a Christian neo-Gnostic or dualist sect founded in the First Bulgarian Empire, precisely by the priest Bogomil, during the reign of Tsar Peter I in the 10th century. And one of their peculiar ideas actually was that Satan was the elder brother of Christ. And the Cathars, on the other hand, were members of a heretical medieval dualist or Gnostic Christian sect as well, but a movement between the 12th and the 14th centuries, mostly of southern Europe, particularly what is now northern Italy and southern France. So let's say there was a considerable growth in Gnostic movements, many of which practiced extreme self-restraint, extreme and severe self-discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence. But the main idea here is that the same as previously spoken, which is Gnosticism sees this world, the physical world, as impure, pernicious, maleficent, evil, as a prison of the soul, The true hell, so to speak, is right here. As such Gnostic movements have greatly exaggerated the powers of Satan in the world, since he had been the figure cast out from the divine sphere and fell on earth to rule and cause mischief. So according to these medieval heretics, the world, earth, our world, belonged entirely to Satan, and he ruled over it like a prince or even a god, actually. So these heretics absolutely despised the physical world and their fleshy prisons, a total negation of life in this world. And their aim was to achieve great spiritual purity and reach spiritual freedom of the kingdom of Christ in the hereafter, not here. The point wasn't to live in this world at all, but a total abandonment of the physical to reach the afterlife. As you know, monotheistic religions such as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are very world-denying views, but these heretics took that to extremes. And just like in Judaism, the official church doctrine never assigned Satan the same independence and the unique personality as the Persian Ahriman in Zoroastrianism. Even though Satan eventually assumed many of God's darker aspects as the creator of evil, as it was original in early Jewish faith, Satan still acted only with the permission of the one true God, within Judaism and the official church doctrine. But with the Gnostic sects, from the 10th century onwards, Satan gains a lot more independence, a lot more power. After all, he was understood or perceived in such heretic religious movements as the prince or even the god of this earth. But the masses, the great majority of the population, did not care about the distinctions made by the official church, because people lived in constant fear of evil. So the impact on the mind of the masses, on the majority of the population, in relation to the eminence of Satan's kingdom, which was this world, and his ability to create and to do evil, was far greater. An idea greatly influenced by the heretical dualist thought, which elevated Satan to a position equal to God, simultaneously being a ruler of the world, of the earth, as God was ruler of heavens. This had a very important impact on the official doctrine of the church as well, because in the Middle Ages, certain powers were finally ascribed to the devil. Certainly, the devil, by the Orthodox view, came nowhere near to the attributes the devil had in the religious views the heretics claimed he had. But the devil nonetheless gained new powers with all this religious tension and conceptions. The official doctrine of the church still believed that the devil could not alter or create physical substance, because that was exclusively the power of God as the sole creator of the universe. But in the Christian mind of the 10th century and onwards, that didn't stop the devil from having a real impact upon the lives of mortals. So the church now understood that the devil was of this world, was in this world, ruling it, inhabiting the realm of air, and as such, his demons had the ability to produce illusions and control local motion. The devil and demons now could take on physical appearance by compressing various vapors into aerial bodies. As such, they could actively participate in sexual intercourse with mortals, with humans, and procreate by the use of borrowed semen. And they could also trick people with illusions. They could lift people in the air and take them far away. And the devil and his demons could also, therefore, possess a person and take control of that person's bodily functions. This all changed in the 10th century. And these new ideas concerning the powers of the devil, the new powers of the devil, were crucial in the shaping of the image of the witch, especially the night flight phenomenon. I'm not going to talk about the night flight or the night ride of the witches on this video, not today, but I'll have a video solely about that subject in the future, this very month, which was actually recorded 2 weeks before this one right here you are watching. But it is important to understand that those who practiced magic and those who still held on to pagan beliefs in the 10th century onwards were now believed by the church to be deceived by the devil and his illusions. In the church's view of the 10th century onwards, pagans were simply wrong and being led astray by the devil. And the gods and magic they still worshipped and still practiced were nothing more than illusions of the devil. And the belief that women could fly in nighttime processions was simply another illusion created by the devil. Because he had the power over air, and as such could create illusions and also move people around in the air, because he also had the power to control local motion. The devil's new powers to produce illusions meant that he could delude people of certain supernatural experiences, when in fact such people had only imagined such experiences in the church's view. So when witches believed they could fly, or when people complained that for some reason they had been magically lifted and transported in the air and into far-off places while riding on animals, the Orthodox view of the church insisted that that was nothing more than illusions, and nothing of it was true, and people were merely suffering from delusions caused by the devil. It's especially important, this new view on the figure and power of the devil by the church of the 10th century onwards, because this would completely destroy every pagan practice and belief by making people believe all of it was the work of the devil. So lingering workers of magic and the lingering pagans interiorized that they themselves were wrong for still practicing and believing in such things, because, after all, it had been the devil all along. So this was a very powerful conception within the church from the 10th century onwards that greatly helped the church to uproot and eradicate any sort of belief that wasn't perceived to be towards the one true God or Lord Jesus Christ and the one true faith. Basically, what happened at this point in Europe was that the gods of the old pagan religions became the devil of the new religion, because the old gods were now seen as illusions of the devil, nothing more, deceptions to lead people astray, because the devil and his demons had power over air, and as such, by compressing vapors, they could take on physical form and deceive people. And such physical form could very well be the images of the old gods, especially of the goddess Diana of the Roman goddess, and such other goddess-like figures that became quite prominent during the Middle Ages, labeled by the church and not the pagans as being the goddesses of the pagans. But as I said before, for more information on Diana, please check the recommended video by clicking on this information icon in this right upper corner right here. Because the old gods became the devil of the new faith spreading all over Europe during the Middle Ages, Satan gained a new visual. This is when he becomes the characteristic figure with horns, a tail and hooves, cloven hooves, directly borrowed from deities such as the hunting god Carnunos of the Gaulish peoples and the Hellenic nature god Pan, and so on and so forth. The devil took on the shape of mythological figures and folklore characters from lingering popular beliefs even long after Christianity. The devil from the Middle Ages, and the same devil portrayed in witch trials of the modern period, had little, close to nothing actually, in common with the biblical Satan. In fact, the characteristics of the devil from the Middle Ages onwards, the 10th century onwards, were largely influenced by the characteristics of the old European pagan gods and animistic nature spirits who were demonized by the Christian clergy. And this is also when we start to have animals associated with the devil, as in the devil assuming or taking the shape of those animals, such as the black dog, a cat, a toad, a goat, or other horned animals. Which is curious because the goat in pre-Hebraic religious contexts of the Middle East had been precisely the animal in which God would present itself in the temple. But the goat in Europe, as well as other horned animals, had other connotations, obviously, and such animals were somewhat praised by the old pagans. But it's actually important to remember this idea of the devil being associated with the goat, the male goat specifically. This has to do with an Egyptian cult, actually. The devil was also often depicted as the goat of Mendes, of the city of Mendes in Egypt. The goat of Mendes was a he-goat, a male goat, a deity who was reputed to have copulated with his female followers or worshippers, such as in the same way that the devil was believed to have sexual intercourse with his worshippers. It's precisely the goat of Mendes and its cult that inspired the Christian association of goats with Satan and paganism in general. This idea was specifically strong during the Middle Ages, precisely. But it persists to this day, obviously, as you know it. The very Church of Satan nowadays depicts the goat, this very goat, an anthropomorphization of this goat. Actually, it was Alphonse Louis Constant, also known as Eliphas Lévy, the famous French 19th century occultist, who took aspects of the goat of Mendes and added them to his depictions of Baphomet, which in his own belief it represented the balancing unity of the universe. Lévy depicted his Baphomet as a winged figure that was half human, half goat, with female breasts and a flaming torch between the horns. Of course, this figure is now the archetypal depiction of Satan, as we see in the Church of Satan, precisely created by Anton LaVey. But this was never the original intention of Eliphas Lévy. And Baphomet has very little to do with the devil of the witchcraft trials. And in relation to Baphomet, I hope you have seen or you have been reading the notes right here. I hope I haven't forgotten to put them. I didn't want to extend this video too much, so I thought some things were best kept in a note or several notes, so we can save time. But still important information to take into consideration. So, because of this Egyptian cult of the goat of Mendes, of the city of Mendes, which was most likely a cult that also extended eventually into the Roman Empire, in the Middle Ages, there's that image of witches sometimes depicted as paying homage to Satan by kissing the anus of a goat or a goat-like figure, or even having sexual intercourse with goat-like figures. As you know it, this kiss became known as the osculum infame, or the obscene kiss. And so the church often accused both heretics and witches of kissing the devil in their worshipping to him in whichever form he appeared to them. And it's also curious, now that I remember, to understand that before Christianity, the animal that was seen as the king of animals in Europe, the ruler of the forests in Europe, was the bear, actually. And obviously not the lion, as the lion was brought by the Christians. The bear too was demonized and became one of the animal shapes the devil took to torment people, especially those poor monks and the maiden nuns. So, this is when the devil is associated with the image of the diabolical flying woman, the witch, and becomes the full-time companion of the witch. The devil, having the power over local motion, could lift and transport people through the air and set them down great distances away. So, while witches believed they could fly with their old gods, the church made a reinterpretation of that in the 10th century, and it was in fact nothing more than illusions caused by the devil. And he took them away to be together in their Sabbaths. The devil becomes a central figure in the development of the classic witchcraft and witch stereotype. It became common belief, common knowledge actually, that in order for witches and other workers of magic to have great power over magic, they had to first do or sign a pact with the devil. As you know, many people were accused of witchcraft and tried, and many people were executed. Anyone who was perceived to have any dealings with magic, their power and knowledge could only have come from the pact they made with the devil. The development of this concept of the pact with the devil was instrumental in the reposition of witchcraft as heresy and transforming the practitioners of simple acts of fortune-telling all the way to common sorcery into dangerous heretics who had renounced Christ in order to serve their new master, the devil. So it became common knowledge, the idea that witches met in organized groups to worship the devil collectively. The belief in the pact with the devil and his worship in Sabbaths played a crucial role in the whole witch hunting mechanism. Of course, the idea of the Sabbath in itself did not become fully established until the 15th century. But since at least the 10th century, we see a progression in the development of the figure of the devil. And also the flying diabolical witch and the pact with the devil. And all of this was obviously evolving and taking shape into the idea of the Sabbath, into organized groups of witches gathering in the night time to meet with the devil on specific days to pay homage to the devil, renouncing Christ and express anti-human behavior such as infanticide and cannibalism, as well as indiscriminate orgies and other perverse sexual activity, including the osculum infame, as was said before, the obscene kiss. This is actually funny. Funny in the most horrible and twisted way, obviously, but pagan Romans used to accuse early Christians of regularly indulging in human sacrifice, cannibalism, and incestuous orgies, and they would burn Christians for practicing magic. And then, in the turn of the tide, Christians would do the exact same thing they had suffered from. This demonstrates what this religion was all about. Clearly, they did not learn anything from their suffering and injustice. If anything, it only augmented hatred and violence and perpetuated the suffering in some sort of sickening attempt to take revenge. Anyway, in ancient societies, even within the Egyptian Old World, in the early Jewish society, among the pre-Christian Greeks and Romans alike, even in early Christianity, some types or some forms of magic were still allowed, but often magic performed by the official priesthood, cults, ceremonies, and magic performances of the state, of the official religion of the state, and anything else apart from the state was frowned upon. And the pre-Christian Greeks are the very first to actually banish magical arts and popular beliefs that did not fit into the religion of the state, into the official religion. And as was said before, in the pre-Christian Rome, they were already burning people for practicing certain types of magic. But It is in the Middle Ages, and with the new construction of the devil as the prince or even the god of the earth and having power over the air and local motion, that for the very first time in history, all forms of sorcery and magic, everything, lay in the realm of the devil and were at his command. Therefore, nothing related to magic was permitted whatsoever, not even within the clergy itself. Sorcery and magic for the first time was solely the work of those who had made a pact with the devil. Witches. Alright, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this obviously very quick historical evolution of the devil and how I was wrongly accused of such absurdities when all I ever wanted was to live free and at peace and enjoy this world people keep ruining with their religions. Just kidding. But anyway, I do hope you enjoyed this video and that it was useful somehow. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. This Halloween, don't forget to kiss goats. They too need love and attention. And as always, tack för det.